Okay, welcome back to State of the Nation. I am Steve Hook. You know, Black America is in the midst of an epiphany, I think, concerning Democrats and their actual intent. 2 weeks ago, our first guest penned a piece for Human Events, and it was a pretty big wake-up call to Black Americans and Black pastors as well, all across the nation. Let me just give you a small taste of it. He says, Black ministers have been led down the primrose path by the usual race hustlers who promise increased influence and larger congregations if they preach certain ideological political beliefs, generally liberal, to their parishioners. This is an obscene disservice to their weekly followers who come to these houses of worship for hope and guidance, but instead find pulpit lectures on gloom and doom and hateful political rhetoric that has no place in the house of God. Joining us now to elaborate on this piece and what he thinks is going on from the NCPPR Project 21 initiative, it's Martin Baker. Martin, hello. Welcome to State of the Nation. It's wonderful to see you, sir. How are you today?
It is absolute honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. I got to say, that piece in Human Events, man, that was a real shot across the bow. How is it being received? Do you suspect? Have you gotten any blowback? Have you gotten any support? Just tell us about it.
I'm a Black conservative, so that's nothing. Blowback is nothing new. So obviously, it's something that I'm not unfamiliar with.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But you know, one thing as we've been watching these polls, Martin, I got to say, I am really, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure Democrats all throughout the Beltway are in panic mode with what's going on with the attitude of Black Americans towards Democrats, especially Black males. Have the scales fallen from their eyes? Are they seeing that the Democrats have been conning them, or what do you think?
What I think at this point is that what you're starting to see is that Blacks are starting to once again embrace their conservative roots. And that's not necessarily a Democrat or Republican thing, but historically Blacks have been conservative. In their lifestyles and in their faiths, and they're subtly starting to trust but verify the things that they have been told, they've been taught, they've been shown. They are starting to finally see that the rhetoric does not match up with the results. Yeah. So if that's a wake-up call for one party or another, it should be, because both parties are guilty of the rhetoric, especially when it comes to the fact of politicizing pastors in the Black communities, because both parties will go to a church right before Election Day. They'll sell the dream of the promise of this, that, or whatever. They'll get the parishioners to go out in droves and vote for them. And then when the elections are over with, they're in office, they forget their phone numbers. They forget who they are.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that there's certain, I guess in this day and age, we would just call them influencers. One of them, of course, Charlemagne the God. He's got a very popular program. He has been very open in his calling out of some of the, as you mentioned, the primrose path that Black Americans have been led down. He seems very angry about it and seems to be calling, specifically in this case, calling out Democrats. And I think probably because, you know, when we talk about politics, I know that you're talking about in the houses of worship, it doesn't belong. I fully agree with you, regardless of party. I'm with you there. But Charlemagne the God and others, maybe yourself included, have called out the basic hypocrisy. Here we have, you mentioned, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's true not only of Black communities, but also of Hispanic communities, that they are mostly conservative. And yet Democrats seem to be focused on trans issues, a wide open border, spending money like drunken Marxists overseas on overseas wars. Is that what's going on here? Are people are like, is Charlemagne the God tapping into something that is kind of organic?
What you're tapping into now is, and you did make that point, historically, Black churches and most churches overall have conservative leanings, respecting life, respecting families, finding self-providence, not looking to the government first for the needs to societal ills. You start with your family. You start then with your neighborhood, your church. Then if all else fails, then you look to the government for temporary help, not some long-term cycle of dependency. And these all started in the churches. And that's where the liberals and certain people, certain influencers, to use your phrase, went in, and they knew that they had to go. We can go back into the 30s. Margaret Sanger, who was one of the forebearers of Planned Parenthood, one of her first things when she started her racist eugenic policies was, so that she could soften the stance on it, she instructed her people and her foundation to talk to the black ministers, because she knew she had to start with the ministers first, who could wrangle their parishioners and basically also bring to heel the more radical ones, you could say. And what you're starting to see now is finally, you are seeing the scales being lifted off the eyes of people who for years, for generation after generation, have been duped. To steal a phrase from Malcolm X, they've been hoodwinked, they've been bamboozled, run amok, led astray. You could pick your own phrase. But the lies are starting to come to heel. They sold a bill of goods, and now the checks come due.
Yeah. Or to borrow another phrase, the chickens have come home to roost, haven't they, Reverend Jeremiah Wright? Chickens are definitely coming home to roost. And that's why I say, because we've seen this not just with black Americans, we're seeing it with Hispanic Americans, and quite frankly, we're seeing it with some white, quote unquote, liberals, not progressives per se, but liberals. We're seeing the erosion of civil liberties across the board. And I got to think that when you start getting people like Charlemagne the God and Bill Maher and some of these classically, well, I wouldn't know if Charlemagne the God is a classical liberal, but certainly Bill Maher falls into that category. But when these people start noticing it, and when they start speaking out and saying, wait a minute, you guys have run afoul. It's not just that it's hypocrisy. It's that it's starting to look like a straight up lie, especially when you see what's going on. And I've got to ask you about this, Martin. What's going on today with Hunter Biden? This is people have got to be waking up to this, all regardless of race, creed, ethnicity. Are you seeing this happening too? The waking up of the sheer corruption in front of their eyes?
What you're to bring it back to the article that I wrote, it all boils down to the basic foundations, the faith. People of faith, of what, regardless, whether you're Catholic, whether you're Mormon, whether you're Baptist, Methodist, whatever the case may be, people of faith are finally starting to see something. They're starting to see these policies are not in concert with the faith that I adhere to. And someday I'm going to stand before God, and I'm going to have to answer for how I practiced my faith. Was I hypocritical? Was I fair and honest in my dealings with my fellow man? Did I treat my brothers and sisters in this mortal existence? Did I treat them fairly and equally? Was I honest and above board in all the things that I do? Was I a true disciple of the faith that I claim to adhere to? And they're going to answer for that. And now you're starting to see that, where people are finally starting to take heed to that message. My older brother, who passed away 3 years ago, was a minister. And one of his favorite phrases is that he would say, by your fruits you shall know them. People are starting to be they're starting to be better fruit inspectors. They're seeing the fruits of the people who are professing to be shepherds of the flock, and they're finding out they're not just shepherds, they're wolves. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. They're more intent on having a nicer car, that prime parking spot in the church parking lot, the security there, the mega churches, the multi-million-dollar influences that they are having. That's more important than teaching the basic Christian doctrines that any Christian foundation should be built upon. The foundation of a Christ-centered message. And if it's something that's not of Christ, you're going to see deception. You're going to see hypocrisy. You're going to see policies that erode the things that a basic person of religion would adhere to and would embrace and would strongly follow.
Well, that's well said. Martin, we're going to take a quick break just for a headline. When we come back, I want to talk to you about because obviously your piece at Human Events was really about this, the flock. Let's just say that. Not just about the pastors, but about the flock and the congregation and the people of faith. When we get back, I want to talk to you about that and how that is either growing or shrinking, not just within the Black community, but within the country. My guest is Martin Baker. He's from the National Center of Public Policy Research, Project 21. We'll be back with more from Martin on State of the Nation on TNT Radio right after this headline.